For those of you keeping an eye on the news lately, probably heard about the school massacre in Connecticut. You know, the one where the armed maniac walked into a school with an assault rifle and killed about 20 people or so, most of them being kids. Yeah, well, with a lot of these school massacres, a lot of people love to blame them on video games. In fact, one disbarred lawyer from Miami has already pointed the fingers at video games as the blame for this terrible tragedy by sending messages to several people in the gaming industry, including journalists, saying how it's our fault that this terrible tragedy has occurred. Yeah, it's my fault that a sociopathic maniac decided to walk into a school with an assault rifle and murder people. Yeah, it's our fault. But I'm not going to talk about that guy unless I feel the need that I really need to. Instead, I'm going to be talking about this young boy from Connecticut who was near the incident when it happened and what he's decided to do about the situation. You see, he's decided to take his own stance on video game violence in a very interesting and, as I personally found it, to be a disturbing matter. What kind of stance has this young boy decided to take against the violence in video games? Let's find out.
The 7th grader in Newtown gathers a selection of his personal video games. He's getting rid of them for one reason and wants you to do the same.
Yeah, because that's gonna fucking happen. I love you.
They're all sort of just kill as many people as you can without dying yourself.
Each one is what they call a first-person shooter, a game in which the player looks at a digital landscape over the sights of a weapon and uses it on enemies. They're some of the most popular games on the market. Violent, engaging, some say downright addictive. But once Sandy Hook happened here in Newtown, Max Goldstein and his brother decided they simply couldn't embrace this fantasy world of violence anymore.
Okay, I think I understand where this kid is coming from, because I've seen this before. There are certain times in people's lives when a certain tragedy occurs, like a massacre, where they become very disturbed by the concept of fantasy violence. I'll give you an example. There's a video game journalist by the name of Dean Takahatsu, which I'm probably not pronouncing his last name because I'm terrible with Asian last names. He wrote a book about Microsoft's creation of the Xbox. It's called Opening the Xbox. Go look it up. And he was recently featured in a documentary on video game violence called Mortal Kombat. Not Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat. You can find it up on Amazon. Go check it out. It's a really good documentary. I just saw it about a month ago, I think, and I loved it. But anyway, this particular guy told the story about how he used to love violent video games until a tragedy occurred where he lost his brother to a violent shooter, and he could simply no longer play violent video games. But at one point in his life, he learned to get over the pain, he picked up the game controller, and started playing violent games again. So, I can understand not being comfortable playing violent video games anymore after experiencing a tragedy like this, especially with it being so close to him. But there are tons of gamers out there who have experienced tragedies like this, and they simply haven't given up on playing violent video games. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of gamers in New York who were there on September 11th, and yet they themselves have not decided to stop playing their Call of Duties or whatever they're playing. So I kind of understand where this kid's coming from. He saw a tragedy, he's disturbed by the incident, he doesn't want to play violent video games anymore. And I feel like this is just a phase that he's going through because of the tragedy, and like with Dean Takahatsu, once again, if I'm mispronouncing your last name, I apologize. This is nothing more than a phase that I think he'll go through. And I can understand why. So, there is some understanding to why this kid no longer wants to play violent video games, but there's a little more to this than that. And, well, let's just keep going.
It's a little inappropriate and rude to the families who lost children or who lost sons and daughters to play these games.
Okay, I understand that after experiencing this tragedy, or being so close to it, that you feel uncomfortable playing violent video games. I understand that. But who are you to judge what is and isn't appropriate? Especially you being so young, of course. I just don't understand how you can judge video games as being, the playing of violent video games to be inappropriate because of a tragedy, especially when none of the games you played have anything to do at all with this tragedy. Not at all. It's not like it's some video game about shooting up a school or something like that. I mean, I saw most of the games that he had in that video. Most of them are war shooters. And I just don't get it. How you can judge something's inappropriate. And that's what this kid's doing here. He basically says that I think it's inappropriate for us to be playing these violent video games with tragedies like these happen. And my response to you is, who the hell are you to judge others? Because that's what I feel like this kid's doing. I might be wrong, but that's what I feel like this kid is doing. He's judging me for enjoying violent video games because of tragedy after tragedy like this occurred and saying that it's inappropriate. I'm sorry, I'm kind of offended. And this is from the mouth of a 7th grader. I mean, basically what this kid's mentality is I felt bad playing violent video games after experiencing this tragedy, and you should too, because it's inappropriate. Who are you? I am really disturbed and offended by this kid. And like I said, he's a 7th grader. My God.
With his parents' help, he's created a group called Played Out. We choose not to play, urging fellow kids to ditch their violent games as well.
Telling young kids and young teenagers to give up playing violent video games. As I said it before, yeah, that's gonna fucking happen.
We have bins at our local sports center, and people can drop off their games, and we have the local dump planning to destroy them.
Okay, I understand you want to give up playing violent video games because of this tragedy, like I said before, but you have decided to throw them away and allow the dump to destroy them. I don't know if you guys saw in that video, well, you probably did, but that was a lot of video games he was putting into those boxes. I'm pretty sure that those games are worth at least, I would say, an average of $100 to $300. I mean, if his parents paid for those games, each one of those new, which brand new games are 50 to 60 bucks, that's a lot of money that your parents wasted on those video games for you to just throw them away because you don't want to play them anymore. I mean, sell them to a GameStop and get some of your money back so you can go out and buy some non-violent video games. I mean, why don't you do that? And the only reason I can think of is because, well, maybe they don't want other kids, they don't want to sell them so that way other people will buy them because they don't want people playing them at all. Well, there are so many violent video games out there and so many copies of individual titles that are ridiculously popular that that's not going to happen. I mean, you should just sell them off. That would have been the better choice to be doing here for the sake of making some money, because you're not going to stop people playing violent video games by destroying them. That's just stupid. Boy, this is some really stupid kids here, and I mean really stupid.
The adults are wondering why they didn't think of it first.
I think it's the start of something great. I think it's amazing that the kids are teaching us the road we ought to have been on our own years ago.
A road without violent video games. I can definitely say that's a road that I'll never drive on.
Goldstein says his goal is to reduce violent video games by 1/3 in American homes, starting in his own backyard. Newtown, Connecticut, Lou Young, CBS 2 News.
Oh my God. That's exactly what this kid's trying to do. He feels uncomfortable playing violent video games after this tragedy. He thinks it's inappropriate and offensive to the family members who've lost loved ones to play these games, these violent video games, and he wants you to think and feel the same way as he does. Man, that is just... wow, boy, that is very disturbing. As I said before, I understand why this kid doesn't want to play violent video games anymore, but for him to come out and say that I think it's inappropriate and offensive to people of tragedies who lose loved ones to continue playing these violent video games, and then for him to go out and try to get you to feel the same way is just so inappropriate. I mean, this kid reminds me of the kid who does the no cussing club. You know, the kid who goes around trying to encourage kids to not use fuck and shit and goddamn it and all other sorts of swears. I mean, this kid is just like that. He is just like that. And here's my response. How many kids do you think that he's actually gotten to encourage him to give up their violent video games? Probably not very much, as I would say, considering how much kids love violent video games. Maybe even more so than adults in some ways. And I know this group just started out, but I would love to hear an update on this We Choose Not to Play Anymore group. I would love to hear an update and see how they're doing, because I can tell you right now, they're not going to get very far. They're no different than the groups that want to give up people to stop watching porn. Yeah, they've had some success, but you know what? It's not going to happen. All right? And I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to do exactly what the anti-porn groups do. They want to get rid of pornography by getting rid of the demand for it. They want you to stop watching porn, so that way there will be no more demand for porn and we can get rid of it. This kid, he's a kid, 7th grader. Like I said, I can't believe this is coming out of the mouth of a 7th grader. Jeez. Who basically wants people to stop playing violent video games, so he wants to try to get rid of them by decreasing the demand. Well, you know what? As long as people like me exist, I will continue to play both violent video games and non-violent video games. And I don't care what tragedy happens. No matter what tragedy ever occurs, I will never stop playing. And of course, some people out there would say, yeah, well, you say that now. But you know what? Even if I did become uncomfortable playing violent video games as experience a tragedy, I would never go around saying that I feel it's inappropriate or offensive to play these games because of a tragedy. I would say I'm uncomfortable playing them, so I'm going to stop playing them. And I would never go around saying that they're inappropriate or offensive because of these tragedies. And I certainly would never go out and try to get other people to think the same way I do, because that's just wrong. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some good old video game violence to catch up with.